Hello, my name is Cheryl Meyer, otherwise known as Cheryl M. Health Muse, and I am a health coach. I want to welcome you to my podcast, It Feels Good to Feel Good, Future-Proof Your Health. This is a weekly show that will share lifestyle changes that you can make to support your health yourself. Why do I want to share this information with you? 7 years ago, after being a business owner for 20 years, I woke up one morning in horrific pain where every bone and every joint in my body hurt. I went to the doctor. She ran lots of tests, and then she ran some more, and then she ran some more, and finally she called me and announced she was going to give me steroids, but there was absolutely nothing wrong with me and I should seek therapy. I knew something was wrong. I hurt. So she told me I would be on steroids for the rest of my life, and I refused that I was going to have a life of pain and pills. So why was I going to take steroids if there was nothing wrong with me? So I dug in and started researching, and I turned my business over to my staff. I found a functional doctor who confirmed that I had autoimmune disease. By making a series of significant lifestyle changes that I could do for myself, 5 years later, I had returned to relative health. The best part is that I am now 70, and I feel better now than I did when I was 50. I no longer hurt, which is huge. I will always have autoimmune disease, but losing the pain has been amazing. I went back to school at 67 and became a health coach because I want to share everything that I learned with others. And I wrote a book called It Feels Good to Feel Good, Learn to Eliminate Toxins, Reduce Inflammation, and Feel Great Again, as the manual I wished that I had had when I got sick, and my book has won 13 awards. So whether you want to future-proof your health and grow old with dignity and grace without dementia and chronic pain and disease, which you don't need to get, or whether or not you already have a chronic condition like autoimmune disease or cancer or heart disease, and you want to learn about what things you can do to improve your long-term health, or whether you want to improve the health of your families and raise healthy children, because 53% of our children have a chronic condition, I look forward to sharing all this information with you. I will tell you, it truly does feel good to feel good, so let's get started. I look forward to having you join me here every week, and I want to give you hope that if you have chronic pain or chronic disease, you can make changes that will improve your health. And if you don't want to go there, you're going to be fine if you listen to the show and put these things into work. I want to give you information so that you can grow old and have a better tomorrow. So thank you for joining me. Let's get started. Welcome to another edition of It Feels Good to Feel Good, Future-Proof Your Health. We're going to shift direction a little bit today. I have talked often about how whoever's within your 3 degrees of separation are the people who influence you the most. But what I haven't talked about, and it's very important to your health, is are you in a toxic relationship on any level with your spouse, with your best friend, with employees, with employers, with anybody, because that directly impacts your health, it impacts your gut, it causes a lot of additional stress to your body, and it's just all the way around not good for you and can even cause depression, which is what we just finished talking about. I did just read a statistic this morning that I'm going to add that's a little bit off course here, that there's been a 25% increase in depression since COVID started. So the isolation has definitely impacted our mood. But unfortunately, in some cases, it has also impacted our closest relationships. And some of them that we didn't realize were toxic, when we started being isolated with those people, we began to recognize as toxic. So this is going to be how to recognize it, what to do about it, and then probably next time I'm going to go into what makes a good relationship and the things that you should strive for so that you're in a supportive, loving relationship at all levels, whether it's your parent or your friend or your employer or your employees or your spouse, so that you can live long, happy, and thrive. So I'm going to start off today with a quote. You don't ever have to feel guilty about removing toxic people from your life. It doesn't matter whether somebody's a relative, a romantic interest, an employer, a childhood friend, or a new acquaintance. You don't have to make room for people who cause you pain, period. And you don't need to be around people who make you feel small. It's one thing if a person owns up to their behavior and makes an effort to change and hears you when you discuss it with them and wants to be in the relationship with you and wants to make it better. But if a person disregards your feelings, ignores your boundaries, and continues to treat you in a harmful way, they need to go. That's a quote from Danielle Koki, who is a speaker about motivation in management. And she's right. When I got sick and I wrote my first book, I actually wrote a whole chapter on toxic relationships because when I got sick, I was in one. And I didn't even really recognize that it was toxic. And there are many degrees to toxic relationships. It can be narcissistic, which we'll talk about towards the end of this. It can be abusive, which we'll talk about at the end of this. Or it can just be mentally and emotionally abusive, and you love them so much, you keep making um, up for what they're not adding to the relationship, and you're making excuses for them. And none of them are good for you, and all of them contribute to your stress, your anxiety, and your health. So, toxic relationships can make you ill, whether it's toxic love, toxic friendship, toxic employer, toxic relative, or even toxic social media. I know I post a lot about health on toxic media. There are shills out there that want the golden standard study about why you should eat real food, and they love to go after me. And there's never going to be that kind of study because real food doesn't have big money behind it. And let's think about it. Do you really need a study to prove to you that you should be eating real nutrition and eating all the colors of the rainbow so that you get all those beautiful phytonutrients? You shouldn't need to have a study for that. But they are toxic in the way they go after me on social media. And so you have to be aware that social media has its plus side. It can offer you a healthy community, whether you're isolated or you're out in the world. It's a new avenue to build friendships, but it also opens up a door for toxicity. And in all honesty, when some of these obnoxious people go after me, I think it's because they're hidden. They're on the other side of the veil of social media, so they don't have to take responsibility for just how nasty and toxic they're being. So that's another thing that you have to look out for. Toxic relationships can cause feelings of low self-worth, helplessness, fear, anxiety, depression, insecurity, paranoia, and even narcissism. Toxic relationships are dangerous to your health, and we'll talk about how that is. And a toxic relationship can literally kill you. So you have to be responsible for yourself. You have to learn to set boundaries. No more Mr. Nice Guy. You have to sit down with anybody who's making you feel uncomfortable or unloved and have the conversation that their behavior is making you unhappy, and you're sure that they don't know that they're doing that to you, but you want to make them aware of it because you value the relationship and you don't want to have to leave or cut it off. But it's not healthy for you to be in it in the condition that it's in. And see, can you fix the relationship first? And if you can't fix the relationship, then you've got to let them go. Stress shortens your lifespan, and toxic relationships create stress. Those who reported adverse close relationships had a 34% increase in a risk of developing heart issues. The number one killer in America is heart issues. So adverse relationships contribute directly to having heart issues, even after taking weight, social support, and other factors into consideration. The biggie is still the stress from a toxic relationship. That's a pretty substantial increase. And more recent research from the University of Michigan in 2016 supports this finding, noting that stress and a negative relationship quality directly affects your cardiovascular system. Toxic relationships cause high blood pressure, stress, cholesterol, leaky gut, inflammation, blood sugar fluctuations, poor sleep, which exacerbates the issue, anxiety, and it can impact maintaining a healthy weight. So if your weight is increasing because you're in an unhappy or a toxic relationship, then that's also impacting you. It creates self-esteem problems and it erodes your self-confidence. And all of that is not good. You deserve to be happy, but you have to own it, because if you're in a toxic relationship, you got to do everything you can do to try to make it better before you open up the door and say hasta la vista. 2 decades worth of research has determined that there were causal links between social relationships and mortality. The links were associated with social integration, social strain, and social support. An article in Very Well magazine actually voices the issue. Researchers have found in studies that social isolation is linked to inflammation and hypertension. 2 decades of research published in 2016 underlined a connection between socially isolated and the risk of inflammation. So we just went through a period of social isolation, and that kind of closeness with your significant others, whether they were your children, your parents, your spouse, your closest other, it pulled the covers back on some unhappiness in the relationship that we were too busy to notice previously. And so it led to even greater social isolation. This social isolation could even be riskier than clinical factors like diabetes when it came to hypertension. Prolonged conflict with other people was strongly associated with lower self-rated health and more health issues, according to a survey that was done over 2 years. Any kind of stress, whether it was due to a lousy relationship with a lousy person or whether it was because of a demanding job, has a remarkable impact on the efficacy of your immune system. Psychology Today states, and even many health-conscious people don't realize that the quality of their relationships can be just as toxic to their health as fast food or a toxic environment. In fact, unhealthy relationships may contribute to a toxic internal environment that leads to all of the things we've talked about: stress, anxiety, and depression, and then they lead to medical problems. In a long-term study that followed more than 10,000 subjects on an average of 12.2 years, researchers discovered that subjects in negative relationships were at far greater risk of developing heart issues, including a fatal cardiac event, than counterparts whose close relationships were not negative, or even better, that were happy. So I want to start by talking about your significant other, whether it's your spouse or it's a long-term relationship. That's where you should be getting your greatest anchor to the earth and your greatest amount of support. But that's not always the case. When I got sick 9 years ago, I commented I was in a relationship that wasn't physically abusive, but as we did break up, because he didn't like it that I was sick, and I pulled away from it, I began to look back at some of the behaviors. And the fact that he saw me only for who I wasn't. He did not see me for who I was. And we're all mixtures of good and bad, so you want to be loved for all of you. And he just always saw what I wasn't. And that actually was in its own way mentally abusive. He loved to go out to expensive restaurants, but after being together for 8 years, when I got diabetes and I wanted to stop eating out at rich food and heavy calorie-laden food, he announced that he didn't like it, that I was sick. Well, there wasn't much I could do about it. Ended up I had autoimmune disease, but I didn't know that at the time. I was starting my treasure journey to find out what was going wrong with my body. And I wanted to clean up how I ate because I thought that might make a difference in terms of how I felt, and he would have nothing of it. He did not want me to dictate to him how to eat. So it didn't matter that we could go to a restaurant where we could both eat. We needed to go to a restaurant that he wanted to eat at, whether that was good for me or not. And he was also upset that I had gained weight, but so had he. But it was all my fault that he had gained weight. He was not taking any responsibility for himself. And we'll get to how some of these are signs that the relationship is toxic, whether you're recognizing it or not. We had literally eaten our way through Pasadena, California, eating at all these high-end restaurants, and we had both gained weight, and we were eating food that was not giving us the nutrition that our bodies needed, and the added weight was showing that we were eating that way. This person, who I was with for 9 years, had also recently lost a lot of money in the stock market and had become sullen and difficult to be around. He started dating other women, but I didn't know that, so he was not being faithful anymore. And these are all just symptoms of the underlying toxicity that was growing. He was looking for self-esteem from other women because he didn't feel he was getting it from me, because I knew his whole story and I didn't want him to be short trading on the stock market. And he didn't even want to fess up to me how much money he had lost, even though we didn't get married and we had not merged our joint finances. So it didn't really impact me. I did make a comment once that in the worst case scenario, he could come live with me. And that was the wrong thing to say, because he felt that that was, again, taking away from his self-esteem and who he was. And it was really all about him. But understand, I would never have left him when he was down. And so, in reality, he did a big favor by leaving me. Now, he broke my heart. I'm not going to tell you that he didn't. And I did grieve, and I did go through some time where I needed to rebuild who I was, because he'd become an intricate part of my life. But I didn't contemplate how unhappy I had been at the end of that relationship. And it really comes down to happiness. You don't have to justify when you're not happy anymore. Not to yourself, not to them, not to anybody. But you do need to protect yourself if you find yourself in a situation where you are continually unhappy and walking on eggshells. It isn't realistic to expect to be happy in every moment of your life. But as a whole, your significant other should make you feel happy when you're with them, or at least happier in general, because you're in the relationship. The man I'm with now wants me to be happy. He goes out of his way to make sure that I'm happy. And I have to tell you, if you're in a relationship where you're not happy, there is somebody on the other end of it that will care about you and want you to be happier. But you're not going to find him while you stay in the unhappy relationship. This significant person should make you feel supported and capable of doing whatever the hell it is that you want to do. You should know that even though you don't have control over every aspect of your life and things will fall apart, this person should ground you and give you stability. He or she should help you rebuild and give you hope that things can be the way that you think they should be, where you can come back to your center and be happy once again. So as I came out of the other side of my pain, I realized I could start to deal with the pain that my body was experiencing because the autoimmune disease gave me so much pain. I had a hard time getting up in the morning because everything hurt. And my allopathic doctor didn't think it was real. She thought it was in my head. So I wasn't getting any support from the medical community, and I wasn't getting any support from my most significant relationship. And I did have a business, I did have a staff. They were very supportive, but the toxic relationships on the other end of that were not helping me get better. In fact, were probably part of the reason that I kept getting worse. I realized I could deal with the pain my body was experiencing, that significant inflammation in my body had begun, and that my toxic load had gone over the top into autoimmune disease. I had started watching 19 different symposiums by the functional medical community, and they were talking about toxic load and leaky gut and stress. And I knew I had a lot of stress. Friends were pulling me aside and telling me that stress was something that accumulated and that I needed to start to deal with it now. Now, a lot of my stress came from the relationship and a lot of my stress came from the business because my industry was going through rapid change. And I was right on the apex of the change. I was trying to keep up with it. I was still doing business, but even my faithful business partnerships had started growing a little more toxic because there were more manufacturers than there were places to sell the product. And so they could be more demanding to the point that if you didn't get to make a profit, they really didn't care. And that was putting me over the edge as well. I could start to eat the way I was supposed to eat for diabetes and sugar control, and I could start to take care of me once the relationship was over. In the end, I understand that he actually did me a big favor. The breakup is what set me on my road to health. And I'm not telling you that it wasn't difficult because he broke my heart, but I went through that period of serious grief. But what a gift he gave me because he set me free to find my path back to happiness and wellness. And with if I stayed in that relationship with him, I'd probably still be struggling with serious autoimmune disease. And as I've explained in these podcasts, when you get autoimmune disease, if you don't deal with your triggers and what's causing it, you start getting multiple autoimmune syndrome, which means it multiplies into other areas of your body out of balance and not functioning correctly. So, what are the signs that a relationship is toxic? And this is true whether it's your significant other, or it's an old friend, or it's a child, or it's a parent, or it's your boss, or it's your employees, or it's your business relationships. These signs are pretty much the same, and you need to flag them and be aware because you deserve better. And you control that because you do control the environment you put yourself in, and you can change that. So the first sign is a lack of support. Negative energy, feeling uncomfortable, and tense around somebody is your body reacting to negative energy that is surrounding the two of you. Negativity can drain you mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And we're first forced to deal with all this stuff. So your reprieve needs to be change or fixing it so that you alleviate that stress. The second sign is toxic communication. Instead of kindness and mutual respect, most of your conversations become filled with sarcasm and criticism and fueled by contempt. Oh, I'd like to tell you that I wouldn't have tolerated that, but I did. And I'm a pretty strong person. So I'm flagging all of this because I want you to know that you don't have to put up with it either. And so we're going to talk about what to do about it. Arguing without communicating. We all know that yelling at each other won't get you anywhere, but it's natural to get upset and argue. And there's no exchange of communication, and neither party conveys why or she feels the way you do, then nothing gets solved. So toxic communication can either be angry conversations, filled with emotion that doesn't resolve anything, or quiet conversations where you're afraid to bring up why you're so unhappy and you simply don't communicate at all. Number 3, envy or jealousy. While it's perfectly fine to experience a little bit of envy from time to time, it can be an issue if your envy keeps you from thinking positively about your partner's successes. You should be as happy for your partner's successes as they are for yours. That's part of the foundation and the support. The same goes through with jealousy. Yes, it's a perfectly natural human emotion, but when it leads to constant suspicion and mistrust, it can quickly begin to erode your relationship. Jealousy and the blame game. We're all only human, so jealousy can happen at any level. I had a friend who was online who introduced me to a friend of hers. She joined my Facebook group. And all of a sudden, the little green jealousy horns came up. And she started posting things that were meant to make me upset with her friend because I took health in my group and she was cooking with ingredients that were not things that I would consider healthy. But I don't make decisions for people. And she was pitting us against each other on purpose because she was jealous that we had started to form our own relationship. Now, I believe hearts are big enough that they can love many people, so there's no reason why this person can't have a relationship with my friend who introduced us or with me. But jealousy is a weird little green devil that raises its little head, and you need to be aware of that because it's not healthy and you don't have to put up with it. Number 4, controlling behaviors. Does your partner ask where you are all the time? Maybe they become annoyed or irritated if you don't immediately answer them or text them again. And if they start texting you all the time, where are you, where are you, where are you? And you don't want to keep answering them because you just did. These behaviors could stem from jealousy or from a lack of trust, but they also suggest a need for control, both of which contributes to relationship toxicity. In some cases, these attempts at control also suggest abuse, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. Number 5, resentment. If you need to nurse grievances quietly because you don't feel free speaking up when the grievances occurs or when something bothers you, if you can't trust your partner to listen to your concerns, your relationship could be toxic. Now, the man that I'm married to now, if I bring up something that's bothering me, he will immediately go away, think about it, and then come back and we'll sit down and have a conversation because I think that this is the reason that occurred, and I think I can change here, and I think that you could help me by doing this. We talk it out like two loving human beings. You have to be willing to do that. If you can't express frustration, or an area that's not making you happy, then you have elements of toxicity in your relationship. Criticism and contempt, remember, no one is perfect, and the closer you become with someone, the more conspicuous his or her imperfections will become. There's nothing wrong with criticism as long as it's coming from a positive place and from a place of love. When criticism is used as a channel to express contempt or disdain, then that person feels unvalued and worthless. It's hard for a relationship to come back from that if you're making your partner feel they have no value, or if they're making you feel like you have no value. And then there's also passive aggression that fits into resentment. The whole, I hate it when you do that, but I'm just going to keep it to do it myself and throw you shady little side glances because you're doing it. My mother was a master of passive aggressive behavior. Drives me crazy, hits all my buttons. But you see it in relationships all the time. They don't hit whatever's bothering them directly, but they sort of come around at it from the back and then hit you with a 2x4 with it in a way that's not quite clear so that you don't really know what you did or what you can do to fix it. Once you're not comfortable being direct with your special other, you've lost that bond on which your relationship was originally built. Number 6, dishonesty. If you find yourself constantly making up lies about your whereabouts or who you meet up with, whether it's because you want to avoid spending time with your partner or because you worry how they'll react if you tell them the truth, that's a sign that there's toxicity in that relationship. You're not yourself. Change will happen regardless. When you're in a relationship, even if you both change, you need to be headed in the same direction. If your relationship changes you, it should only make a better version of you, not a worse version of you. If you feel that avoiding each other, skipped a page. If you feel that you're losing yourself or you don't recognize who you are anymore, then that's not healthy. Number 7, patterns of disrespect. Being chronically late, casually forgetting events, and other behaviors that show disrespect for your time are a red flag that there's toxicity in your relationship. 8, negative financial behaviors. Sharing finances with your significant other often involves some level of agreement about how you'll save or spend your money. That said, it's not necessarily toxic if one partner chooses to spend items on items that the other partner doesn't necessarily approve of. But it becomes toxic if you've already come to an agreement and then they go spend that money anyway, purchasing big ticket items or withdrawing large sums of money. That needs to be agreed upon from the beginning so that they know you're going to do it. Otherwise, that actually probably is somewhat passive aggressive and it's toxic and it's going to cause divisions in the relationship. Number 9, constant stress. Ordinary life challenges come up. There are family member illnesses or job losses that create some tension in your relationship. Losing a lot of money in the stock market is an example of that. But finding yourself constantly on edge, even if you aren't facing stress from outside sources, is a key indicator that something is off. The ongoing stress can take a toll on your physical and mental health, and you might frequently feel miserable, mentally or physically exhausted, or generally unwell. Stress impacts every organ in your body. So learn to breathe a couple of times a day, go through your breathing exercises, reset your parasympathetic nervous system, and become aware of what's causing that stress to build up in your body so that you can take care of it. And if you begin to avoid each other at a bare minimum, you should be able to tolerate your significant other's presence, because if you can't even bring yourself to be around him, you really just should call it quits. Number 10, they continue to ignore your needs. Going along with whatever your partner wants to do, even when it goes against your wishes on a comfort level, is a sure sign of toxicity. Say they planned a vacation that will take you out of town on your mom's birthday, but when they asked you what dates were convenient, you emphasized that these dates were fine, but the time around your mother's birthday was not. You wanted to be here for that. It was important to you, it was important to her, and you loved her very much. And then they go ahead and plan the vacation for that period of time. They're not paying attention to your wishes and your wants and desires, and they're ignoring your needs. Toxicity. And then you don't want to necessarily point it out, so you try to go along with it because you don't want to fight. So instead you say, great, I'm so excited, but you're not excited, and it's going to come out in passive aggressive behavior or in some other way when you're on that vacation because they didn't pay attention to your needs. And no matter how you try to put a happy face on that, it's going to come out. We are who we are. So it's much better to confront things head on and be who you are and clear the air than it is to just sweep it under the rug because one way or another it's going to come out. Number 11, lost relationships. Sometimes your significant other, if it's toxic, will start to cut you off from other relationships that are important to you. So if they've been cutting you off from friends and family, either to avoid conflict or to get around to explain what's happening in your relationship, that is a sign of toxicity. They don't want to share you They don't want you to be around other people. And when you are around other people, they think you're talking about them and that you're saying bad things about them. So they become very upset that you're spending time with other people because what are you saying about them? None of that is a sign of stress, and all of that is a sign of toxicity. Lack of self-care on your part. In a toxic relationship, you might let go of your own self-care habits. You might withdraw from hobbies you once loved, or neglect your health, or sacrifice your free time. And this might happen because you don't have the energy for these activities or because your partner disapproves when you do something by yourself that brings you pleasure. That's toxicity that needs to be discussed. Now, that one's smaller than some of the others because that's something you could actually sit down in a loving relationship and set parameters and find a way to make it work. So that doesn't have to be the end of a relationship, but you do have to confront it and you do have to make the space for yourself. Number 13, hoping for change. You might stay in the relationship because you remember how much fun you had at the beginning. Maybe you think that if you just change yourself and your actions, they might change and go back to that person as well. Or you start to feel like there's no point. There's a difference between staying in a relationship because you're comfortable and staying in a relationship because you truly want to be there. If you feel like your relationship isn't going anywhere, and if they don't hear you when you try to talk to them, why are you wasting your time? That's the time you'll look back on with regret, but you'll never be able to regain or relive. So if you do sit down with somebody and try to resolve all these issues and they don't seem to be resolvable, then that's the time for you to move on because you have too much life to live and to be happy in. So you need to set up the boundaries that that's not acceptable and move on. Number 14, do you feel like you are always walking on eggshells? You worry that by bringing up problems, you will provoke extreme tension. So you become conflict avoidant and you keep your issues to yourself. You think that you only think about making him happy. You're not thinking about how he needs to help make you happy as well. Once you hit your 20s, relationships are a trial run for marriage. Well, here I am at 73, so I've been through every single kind of relationship that's on this list, and I did not always confront it when I recognized that it was going on. So I wasted a lot of time in relationships that had no place to go but down. So that's why I'm talking about this, because they did impact my health, and they did suck some happiness out of my life that I could have found either by just being with me or being in a relationship that was supportive and loving. Your relationship has to be a two-way street or it won't work. Your happiness should mean his and her happiness and your happiness. If you're constantly trying to make them happy but you're not getting anything in return, then something in the cycle is disjointed because happiness must be mutual. You can't seem to do anything right. That's kind of where I got into with my long-term relationship. No matter what I did, I was walking on eggshells and I couldn't seem to do anything right. And the more I tried to do things right, the worse I got at it. So when you get to the point where it seems like everything you're doing is upsetting them or annoying them and you're tiptoeing around in your relationship, you need to understand perhaps you're not the problem. There's something with which your significant other is unhappy about, whether he is or isn't communicating it to you. So most likely he's not communicating it to you. And if you can't do anything right, if they won't communicate to you, you can't get to the bottom of what's wrong. So until he or she is honest with why he is really frustrated, nothing you do will ever seem to be enough. So my relationship ended. And in the first 8 months, I lost 40 pounds without dieting. I ate right. I took care of myself. I did the things I knew I should be doing when I was in the relationship. And so a lot of my excess weight just fell off. I took a class on how to date from a woman named Allison Armstrong. She's an amazing guru and has very sensible advice on male-female relationships and dating. She kind of cracked me up. I heard her on Dennis Prager's radio show, which on Fridays is always about relationships. And her comment that caught my ear was she was constantly dating princes, kissing them, and turning them into frogs. I thought that was a riot. And when I broke up from this long-term relationship, I had been through a series of long-term relationships that in the end had not worked out, and I decided it was time to get some sensible advice because I obviously wasn't very good at this long-term relationship thing. So here I was 9 months later, and I'm taking this class from Allison Armstrong. Now, if you look her up, she's written several books that are amazing, and she does a dating course, and I don't know if she's still doing this, but she was doing a 2-for-1 special. If you took it with a girlfriend, because again, she believes that community will support you in making the changes that you need, you can do 2-for-1. So look it up and see if she's still offering that. Even if you're paying full price, her course is worth it. I learned things about men I never knew before. And I learned things about women that explained my own behavior in relationships. But the best part was it was over 2 weekends. And at the end of the first weekend, she looked at me and said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Because I'm lousy at this relationship stuff." And she said, "How carefully are you choosing?" I said, "I think I'm choosing carefully." She said, "How many of your non-negotiable items when you start a relationship are you allowing to exist so that you start off on an uneven ground right from the beginning?" She said, "Before you come back next weekend, I want to see your list of what's completely non-negotiable and the things that you would like to manifest, but they're not non-negotiables, and then things that your non-negotiable list is things you just can't tolerate." So I made my list. And I went on Our Time, the old fogey dating site. And I used my non-negotiable list for what I was looking for. My current husband, my sweet John, answered me in 3 days and lived 10 minutes away from me. He had just lost his beloved wife of 43 years to cancer, and he paid very close attention to what I listed as what I was looking for, so that when we talked the first time on the phone, he literally went through my list to explain to me why he might be my perfect partner because of blah, 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 point by point. But the last thing he said on that first phone call was the one that caught my attention. He said, "I've been the caretaker for my wife for the last 5 years. I've gained a lot of weight." One of my things was I wanted someone to go on a get well journey with me. He said, "I've gained a lot of weight because I've put all of my attention on her needs. But if you give me a chance, I'm probably the nicest guy you'll ever meet." And you want to know something? He is. So I took that chance and I won big time. So don't be afraid to put out there what you're looking for, because by keeping your non-negotiable list and looking for somebody who does want to meet all those points, you're actually going to find the perfect partner for you so that you can find happiness. John, as I commented, really just wants me to be happy. And he'd been in a healthy relationship for 42 years, so he knew what a healthy relationship looked like, and that ended up being to my benefit. His first wife trained him very well, and he's very empathetic and open. She was a family counselor. He's very empathetic and open to hear me when I talk, and I try to also be open and hear him when he has something that he wants to share with me. So we are very careful to make sure that if we're doing something that's not loving, we change. And that's the basis of our relationship. And he loved her very much. I sometimes tease him that she was his grand passion. And he always sort of laughs and says, "You don't understand, I got lucky twice." Well, I certainly got lucky this time, so I'm really glad that I found him and met him and married him. He's a true partner, and he supports me in all that I do. He actually edited my books. He's a statistician, and He's a reader. He was a major, I think, in math and a minor in English. So I was a major in English, so we both were avid readers, and we have a lot of things in common, but I'm not a mathematician, so he also brings things to the relationship that fill up a part of me that I'm not, and I'd like to think that I do some of that for him as well. But our two puzzle pieces fit together well. He is in complete support of my quest for health. And in the time he's been with me, he's lost 70 pounds. And he considers himself my first health coaching success. He was pre-diabetic, then he became diabetic. Now he's not diabetic at all. He went out the other end. His cholesterol is excellent. He's not on any diabetes medication anymore. The lifestyle that we found and the changes that we made have been healthy for both of us, and maintaining our stress and keeping it at a low ebb has also been very healthy for us individually and for our relationship. And we use something that I've showed in these podcasts called a belly button wand, which on occasion we use on each other because it releases stress in the body, and it's a very loving thing to do. I have a ton of sensitivities, and every time my doctor uncovered more and I lost more foods to eat, John's response was always, "It's okay, honey. We can just invent a new way to cook." God love him. So he's been with me for my journey, and he's a big reason why I have gotten healthy again, and I am functioning, and I've come back to some semblance of balance. I was much sicker than he was when we met, but I have come back to a semblance of balance. And it's because he has supported me every step of the way. He also has his own sensitivities, so now we cook around both of them. I'm telling you my story because I want you to understand that if you're in a toxic love relationship, you've got to sit down and try to work it out in an attempt to change course and make it better. You can't just stay in it because that spiral only goes down. You can stop it, you can freeze it, you can identify where the problems are, and you can try to talk them out. And if the toxic person doesn't want to talk about the issues, then they've made the decision for you that there's no place to go, you got to let them go. So there is happiness on the other side of that, so don't be afraid. Do what you need to do to find your own happiness. So let's define what a toxic relationship actually is. And this doesn't have to just be a significant other. It could also be your toxic friend, your toxic parent, your toxic relative, your toxic employer, coworker, your toxic customer, your toxic whatever it is. But they need to be purged nonetheless if you can't fix any of the things on this list. Signs of toxic people. Number 1, they are never wrong. Number 2, they love drama or are completely shut down and show no drama at all. They are continually critical. They like to talk and interrupt. They lack compassion. They love to gossip and talk badly about others. They feed off of negativity. They isolate you from others. They're passive aggressive. They're displaying jealousy and the blame game. They're showing criticism and contempt. They're exuding tons of negative energy. You can't seem to do anything right. They're avoiding you, and neither of you is happy anymore as a result. But they're making no effort to improve things. So you got to sit down. You have to put the spotlight on these things. You have to see if you can make it better. And if you can't, you got to let them go. In an article in WikiHow called How to Recognize a Toxic Friend, now this is a friend, not a significant other. If you think you're in a toxic friendship, consider your feelings about your friend and the time you have spent together. Now, you've heard the thing, some friends are for a lifetime, some are for a season, and some are for a shorter period of time. Friends do tend to come and go. I do have some friendships that go back years, 50, 60 years. And then I have other people that I was very close to that I have not been close to for long periods of time. We change, we grow, we go in new directions. Nothing's wrong with any of that. But if you're staying in a relationship with a friend that's become toxic, that's also increasing your stress level, and you got to try to fix it or you got to let them go. Generally, I think friends just sort of drift apart. And I can't even tell you why I've drifted away from some of the people who were in my life. But if it's something that you can identify that you can make better and the relationship's important to you, you've got to give it that try. Is the behavior that's annoying you something that your friend just started to do, or has it been going on all along? Do you feel unhappy after spending time with this friend? Or does spending time with your friend make you feel upset and defensive? Do you spend time justifying your own behavior around this friend instead of feeling natural and fun just to be together? Are you happy when you're together? Do you feel belittled, attacked, or used? Does the friendship feel unbalanced and plain hard work? Do you feel at fault for things that happened to your friend? Has your friend betrayed any confidences? That's a biggie. Does it feel like a competition rather than a balanced and a caring friendship? I have had people who've wanted to compete with me. And I'm a weird person because I don't compete with anyone but myself. I don't know why that is. Um, I never have competed with other people. I just compete with me because I'm a bricklayer. I like to build towards my goals in layers and lay the foundation one brick at a time. And I judge myself against where I want to go, and I'm constantly reassessing so that I get where I want to go. If you're somebody who wants to compete with me, I'm probably not even going to notice it for a long time. So if they're being competitive and that's bringing out some negative sides to their personality, you don't need that in your life. You need other people who have their own goals and take their own satisfaction from reaching them. So if you're in a toxic relationship, you must sit down and talk to them, whether they're a friend, a lover, a coworker, a boss, a family member, or a parent. You must set boundaries. Love yourself enough to set boundaries. I'm not always good at saying no. I have often been Mr. Nice Guy, but you've got to learn to say no when it's something you don't really want to do. You don't have to say yes to everything. You can explain why you want to say no and keep the relationship open, but you do need to say no when the time is right, and you need to not always be the person bending over backwards to make the relationship work. You must reduce the stress and be with people who are grateful to have you in their life. If you're in a toxic relationship with a parent or a relative, you still must set boundaries. My mother's not here anymore, and I loved her to death, but I used to actually kind of program her to get the response that I wanted if it was something that I thought she might not like. So I would start the conversation, Mom, I'm going to do something and I want to talk to you about it because I know how much you love me and I know you want to support me. So let's talk about it now because I am going to do it. And I want you to be there to see my success when I get it. And then I would explain what it was. And of course she loved me. I knew she loved me. And I knew she wanted to support me. So by flagging it up front, I got 100% support from her because she didn't want to take me down. So whatever you have to do to make sure that your relationship is loving and healthy, you have to give the same to her, remember. If she's going to do something, you need to be open and not judgmental. But with parents, it gets tricky because there still has to be boundaries, and sometimes they're harder to see, just like they're harder to see sometimes with children. You still have to set the boundaries of what isn't acceptable, and everybody has to understand what those boundaries are. If it's a toxic employer and you've tried to fix it and it's not getting fixed, then it's time to act for a transfer or find a new position with a healthier environment. Chris Carr, who is somebody who got stage 4 lung cancer and was told that she only had a few months to live, but who is still living, I think it's 16 years later because of her journey and all of the lifestyle changes that she made. And she wrote a book called Sexy Crazy Cancer, had a blog on her website called How to Identify and Release Toxic Relationships. So these are the questions that she suggests we ponder. Is the pain too great to stay the same? Do I constantly picture an alternate reality? Do I need a translator to be heard? Is it impossible to make boundaries and have them stay within them? Am I the only one who's willing to meet in the middle? Is getting an apology when it's truly deserved harder than pulling teeth? Does this relationship take more energy than it gives? There are energy vampires. I'm going to want to talk about that too. Does blaming and complaining, is it getting old? Am I constantly fatigued when I'm with this person and energetic when they're gone? All of those are signs of toxicity in a friendship, a work relationship, a parent, whatever it is. And if it's a romantic relationship, you need to also ask, are the sparks between the two of you dead? End of story. Do you smile when you want to yell and yell at the wrong people? Is the only thing holding you back fear of newness? Are you afraid of what people will think if this relationship fails? Does this person make you feel like you're lost without them? Do you find yourself missing the old you that you used to be? Are you lonely even when you're with them? Wow, I think my loneliest moments have been when I've been with somebody rather than when I've been by myself. But I went through a period when I first got divorced, way back in 1980, where I went through so much loneliness that I went through what I called the open window into alone time. And once you go through that open window, you're never lonely again because you entertain yourself quite well and you know who you are. And once you reach that point, you're a much easier person to be in a relationship with because you're not needy, you're not sinking your nails in and trying to hold on for all the wrong reasons. You're there because you're choosing to be there, not because you're lonely and you're trying to fill up that hole, but because you do enjoy your alone time, but you would rather spend it with this person. If you decide to end a toxic relationship and it's hard, don't be afraid to reach out for support. You will need unconditional love while you go through the heartbreak. And no matter how difficult the relationship has become, if you love him, it will be painful to pull away, even if it was toxic. So understand that you're going to need support because even if it was toxic, it's going to be rough and it's going to run havoc on your self-esteem and on who you are. When I first got divorced, all those many years ago, I knew who I was as a business person, so that was the first person I reconstructed. The second person I reconstructed was who was I as a friend, because that took on a whole new form once I wasn't married, because I got married when I was 20, so all of my friends where I lived and at the end of my college years were friends that I had had in my marriage. So I knew, then I rebuilt who I was as a friend. The third person that I needed to build was who was I in a romantic relationship, and that one came very hard to me. I grew up with tremendous love, unconditional love, and when he left me, it was the first time that I had not been unconditionally loved. So I was living in abject terror, I think, and fear that somebody was going to hurt me that badly again. So it took me a long time to rebuild who I was as a woman. So understand that even if it was toxic, even if it was unhappy, you're going to be left hurting, and don't be afraid to get support. Don't be afraid to form friendships with people who love you and will support you, and don't be afraid to get therapy to help you get through to the other end. Once you end any toxic relationship, or they end it with you, walk away gracefully with no regrets, no accusations, no if onlys, if only you had done this or if only you had done that, no manipulation, no fingers pointing, and if living toxic employment, no bridge burning. Once free, write down all the things that you are truly grateful for from being in that relationship. The good and the bad. There are gifts and everything. So look for the gifts. Look for all the reasons why you were with them in the first place. Write down all the things that you learned by being in the relationship, and even write down the things that made you unhappy and what you've learned from them, because they're all gifts. So make yourself the list. And then let it go and start to heal. Life has many wonderful adventures waiting for you but you have to be free and clear in order to pull them in. Make sure you take the time to write it all down. And someday you'll find the list, and some of it will seem ridiculous to you, but write it all down so that you can let it go. I even made my list the first time and burned it to release it to the universe so that I closed the door to some of that pain. It was simply time to move on. I learned a long time ago, sometimes there's an angel's hand on my back leading me away from one place to another where I'm supposed to be, where I can find joy and happiness. Getting out of any toxic relationship is an angel's hand on your back, moving you to a better place so that you can find health and happiness. Now, I'm in a good stopping place, but I want to continue this in my next podcast. And what I'm going to start with is narcissism in a relationship. I had a girlfriend who I had no idea had such a narcissistic partner and really made her miserable trying to get out of that relationship. So I think it's important to talk about it. I was writing articles for a magazine for a woman who had gone through domestic abuse, and she published an article in her magazine that I want to read because it's very poignant and it talks about how difficult it is to walk away even from a physical abuse relationship. So I think that's an important part of toxic relationships that we need to talk about. I want to talk about energy vampires because there are people who will pull energy from you. They fill up a room and they grab heart energy from you. The heart is your third brain. Its energy can go as far as I think 20 feet. And if you're around an energy vampire, they're feeding off your energy. So you need to be aware of them. And I want to talk about what I learned, what to do about it. I actually worked with a white witch who only taught me how to do things for the greater good, because anything that you did for the greater bad would come back and haunt you. So I learned some wonderful skills from them. And then I want to go through briefly what is it that makes a good relationship and why it matters. Because not only do you want to know what's a toxic relationship, but then you want to find the right person and you want to build a strong foundation for happiness in your future relationships. So we'll start with narcissism next time. Thank you for joining me. I want you to be aware that if your relationship is not making you happy, it is impacting your health. So you got to do something about it, and you got to do something about it today. So start with trying to fix it, and if you can't fix it, then you got to break away and move on. Okay, thank you. I'll see you again next time. I love talking to you. If you have any questions, you can always write to me at CherylMHealthMuse@gmail.com. And if you'd like to get my newsletters, send me an email or go to my website, and right on the right-hand column of the first page of my website, there's a place where you can sign up to stay in touch with me no matter what, so that you know what I'm doing, what I'm up to, and we can continue the conversation about being as healthy as you possibly can be. Thank you. Hello, could I see a show of hands if there's anybody out there like me who's tried to lose weight their whole life and not been successful? So you've tried all the different diets available. You've tried Weight Watcher. You've tried Jenny Craig. You've tried all the New York Times bestsellers. And the last time you did it, you started off great, just like all the other times. And you started losing weight, and then all of a sudden you fell off the horse. And before you know it, you're eating fast food and processed food again with all that sugar, and you don't even know why. And in the end, you've gained more weight than where you started out. So you now are beating yourself up that you just don't have the willpower to win. If that's you, I want to address the elephant in the room, because 9 years ago, I got autoimmune disease and started researching because I didn't want the pain that came with the autoimmune disease, and the added benefit was I lost the weight along the way. So let me tell you what happens. Big Food doesn't want you to win. They've rigged the system. They've put so many chemicals into fast food and processed food that they light up the brain like a pinball machine. It's the same part of the brain that goes off for cocaine and heroin, and you feel great when you eat that food, but it's not making you feel good, and you're starving your body for nutrition because it's loaded with empty calories, so you're getting fat eating that food, and it's not giving your body what you need. And it's turning off all your own feel-good hormones of serotonin and dopamine and even your insulin, which keeps your moods even. But worse than that, there's two little hormones here at the back of your neck called ghrelin and leptin, and they don't work, and they regulate your appetite because all those chemicals have subdued them, so you don't even know when you're full. So what did I learn to do instead? I'm eating the GLAD diet, loaded with all the phytonutrients that my body needs to be healthy and to thrive and to boost my immune system and to ditch the pain. And along the way of eating all this live food, I lost 60 pounds without dieting. You see, I was starving my body for nutrition when I was eating the standard American diet, and now that I'm giving my body all those beautiful phytonutrients, it's not holding on to it anymore, so it's just dropping it automatically. So don't eat the standard American diet. I don't want you to get a standard American disease, and I certainly don't want you to die the standard American death. Instead, start eating the GLAD diet, because by eating all those beautiful phytonutrients, you will be healthier and you will live long and thrive. Thank you.